Avocado. Well, what's wrong with the rest of you? Y'all don't eat or you don't like us? It's one of those two. Nice avocado. All that food's ready right now. All I got to do is order it. We've been talking about faith being an anchor, and we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 4. This is kind of a preview of this Wednesday's teaching that I'm going to be doing in my class on Nehemiah. So we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 4 in just a few minutes. Just kind of scratching through some ideas on some thoughts. And I was actually supposed to teach this last Wednesday, but we kind of got off track and kind of, it was good though, wasn't it? Did you go home and talk to your husband? Did he set you straight? Ooh. Good. That's the goal. The goal is to make you guys talk. Wednesday was real good. Please sign up for our new classes. They're going to start in a few weeks. My class is Old Testament coloring books, according to my wife. No, storybooks, sorry. Not coloring books, storybooks, but it's not storybooks, it's historical books. And we're talking about the history of Israel and where God is in all of that. It's been very good, at least from my perspective. I'm not even going to ask, but from my perspective, it's been good. Chris and Jen are going to teach one more semester of our foundations class, which is very important. This is, okay, hear me. Those of you in the room that kind of just show up on Sunday and maybe not every Sunday, you need this class. You need this class because you need something to get the ball rolling in your life. You need something to start a fire to get you a little bit motivated to grow. Because if you're not growing, you're not alive. Amen? If you're not growing, you're not alive. You see these beautiful plants we have here. These are awesome, beautiful plants. These are not alive. That's why they never grow. They never die either. We don't have to uproot them or trim them or anything. We don't have to prune them. We don't have to put no work into a dead thing. Right. It's a good song to sing. So we want to encourage you to be a part of those things. A couple other things at the end of the month or beginning of next month, we're going to be taking in new members. There's membership forms out there. Please get a hold to that. Growth requires redefinition. David Williams, do you still define things the same way you did the day you got saved? Probably not. And that's a good thing. Because in our elementary understanding, Kim Kerr, we define things in a way that is palatable or easy for that level of growth that we're in. Right? So when Chance first got saved, he was defining things on a first got saved elementary basis. And that's every one of us. But if you're not growing in your understanding and evolving into greater depth in that while you are growing, then you're not growing. What that means is you can be 40 years saved and still be an infant. Because you're not allowing the process, Aaron used that word earlier, of growth to push you into a wilderness where you have to look at things and say, this has to mean more than what I thought it meant. Let me give you an example of that. Growing up, it was get saved so you don't go to hell so you can go to heaven. Many people think that's the gospel message still. That's not the gospel message. The gospel message is you can operate in the fullness of the kingdom of heaven right now and not have to wait till you get to heaven. That's the gospel message. But unless it grows from that elementary state, you are forever infant. Forever an infant waiting on the rapture to happen tomorrow. That's not what we were designed for. There has to be a growth. There has to be a redefining. There has to be times when you mature to the point where you're no longer, Paul said this, when I was a child, I thought like a child, I spoke like a child, I acted like a child. But guess what happened? I grew up. And when I grew up, I recognize that I grew up. I made a choice to put away those childish things. What childish things? I spoke, I acted, and I thought. I put away childish speaking, childish acting, and childish thinking. And I began to act as an adult. With me? Growth produces an ability to recognize when the attacks you're facing are spiritual, of the enemy, or of your flesh. This is how I know that some people haven't grown up, because everything's the devil. Mama said, everything's not the devil. The devil's not in everything, right? Everything's not the devil. Sometimes you just do dumb things. And you have to, Jim, we talked about this morning. He's got a back brace on because he tried to pick up a loaded down trailer with his arms, thinking he could lift 2,000 pounds. Somewhere in his brain said, you can do that. It's not the devil in your back. It's your dumbness. That's what that is. And a lot of times in growth, you begin to recognize the devil's not after everything that you're doing. He's after spiritual matters. But some of the stuff you're going through is not the enemy. Can I help you? It's because you need to grow up and put away childish things and make decisions based on where you need to go, not what you're feeling in the moment. You know who reacts that way? Children. I'm not getting what I want, so I cry about it until I get what I want. And so there comes a point where you recognize my growing up is revealing to me that I'm making decisions that are causing me to then reap what I've sown. And if I don't want to sow that, I need to stop. If I don't want to reap that, I need to stop sowing that. You can pray all day long for the Lord to deliver you, but as long as you remain in the cage, doesn't matter how many times He opens the gate. You have to be willing to come out. Amen. That's good preaching right there. Do you know that if you study the book of Job, anybody have any clue how long Job is? How many chapters? It's way too, it's like 39 too many. That's how many it is. You know the story of Job, right? The whole theme of Job is what? Like, I lose everything. What all did Job lose? Okay, everything. He lost everything. What did he lose? Lost his children. He lost his wife. He lost his. He didn't lose his wife, but he lost her. She was. She hit the road, Jack, and told him to curse God and die. He lost his children, he lost his friends, he lost his cattle, he lost his everything. He lost his health. He lost it all. Do you realize that in all those chapters, not one time does Job blame the devil? And we know it was the devil. I mean, we got the prequel to the story, and Satan stood before him and asked to sift Job. Not one time does Job give any credibility to the enemy. In fact, Job does this. He says, bless the name of the Lord. Yet will I praise him. Bless the name of the Lord. Have you ever, okay. Why would someone say, bless the name of the Lord in a situation like that? Because there's nothing else around me to bless but him. I've got nothing to bless. So when there's nothing left to bless, I'm still going to bless the Lord. Because I've understood that as I grow, whatever I'm going through is a result, now watch this, of what I choose to do with what I'm going through. My mindset when I'm going through it. Now, I can pout and I can throw a fit and I can get discouraged and I can get angry and I can take the test again. I know this room. Some of y'all have been circling the same mountain Do I need to give an altar call right now? Come on. You got to pass the test. So let's talk about something today. When it comes to the idea of faith and redefining, faith is better defined to me as trust. So believing is one thing, but trusting is totally different. Because we talked about this, I think Wednesday, or maybe, I don't know when. Maybe it's Friday night. We were talking about this in Never Broken. A lot of us believe what God says is true. We just don't believe it's true for us. Right? We believe God can heal. We just don't think He will. So it's not that we don't believe His word. It's that we don't trust His word for us. I believe God can deliver. But do I really believe He can deliver me? Well, my experience of walking through relapses after relapse tells me I don't believe that. And that would be a lack of trust. It's not that you don't believe, it's that you don't trust. And so along with that comes one of the greatest things that I feel like I need to speak to you today about is discouragement. Discouragement. It's not a big sin. It's not a big sin. It's not like adultery or murder or, lying. That is in the top 10 list, right? But it's not a big sin, but it's a killer. If I was to ask you right now, even in the last week, have you been through a process that has discouraged you? Right? I mean, I know some of you are super, like Patrick saved, but you don't, he's angry about his salvation. Disappointment is inevitable, but discouragement is a choice. And yet, it's what most of us deal with, because discouragement is the root to why you quit all the time. Discouragement is the root to why you give in. Discouragement is the root to why you never measure up, or you always relapse, or you always go. The root behind all that is you have lost the courage to endure. The root of your inconsistencies is you don't have the courage anymore. So I want to show you what to do when discouragement hits, because the first thing that happens in Nehemiah chapter 4 is you got to recognize that it's actually discouragement. And it's not the enemy. It's not the devil. Well, it could be, but it's not some big plan to destroy and kill you. It's just a little seed to get you discouraged. Because if discouragement sets in, you'll quit. Right? Sickness sets in, you'll fight. Somebody gets in a car wreck and they're clinging on to life, all of a sudden you're a prayer warrior. Your kid gets in an accident or gets sick, all of a sudden you are a prayer champion. But discouragement sets in. See, the enemy knows how to attack you. The enemy knows how to attack you. So I want you to watch this. The first thing you have to do is recognize what's going on. In chapter 4, it says, Sanballat, by the way, that's an enemy's name, was angry when he learned that we were rebuilding the walls. There's so much spirituality in that. The enemy gets angry when you start building up walls in your life. The enemy he doesn't care as long as anything can come in. But when you start putting up standards in your life, we're not going to do that. We're not going to watch that. We're not going to go there. We're not going to talk like, we're not going to do. When you start to listen, all hell will break loose in your life. And that's when the enemy will go to war against you. He flew into a rage and began to mock them. Look at the tactic. He began to do what? Saying in front of his friends and the Samaritan army officers, what does this bunch of poor, feeble Jews think they're doing? Because the way that discouragement happens is, it is always an attack on your identity first. Before you ever get discouraged in what God has called you to do, you will first begin to look at your insufficiencies within yourself. And when you begin to look at yourself as poor and feeble, because you're hearing that from the talk, or you're seeing it in the actions, when you begin to look at yourself that way, it'll immediately slow you down when it comes to what God has called you to do. All of us in this room have something in their life that God has called you to do. And what is slowing you down from it is discouragement, because when discouragement comes in, it's going to attack who you are and say you're not qualified to do it. Who should be teaching right now in the room? Who should be preaching right now? Who should be out ministering right now? Who should be starting a different class or a different kind of school? Or who should be out doing this or that? Who should be doing things in the room? But you have disqualified yourself. And because you've disqualified yourself, you've quit. And because you've quit, you've become numb. Look at the progression that happens. Why? Because you just got discouraged. I'm not qualified. I don't think I have the right ideas. I don't think I'm good enough. I can't learn like you. I can't talk like you. Notice it wasn't the Jews he was talking to. He was talking behind their back to his friends. Has anybody ever talked about you behind your back? Did that discourage you at all? Did it make you want to quit? What happens, when that happens, you have to recognize that they're talking about me is an attempt to discourage me. I heard Bishop Jake say that one time. He said, when people are trying to pull you down, realize it's because they're lower than you. See, I made that up. Nobody would have said nothing. TD Jakes walk in and go, oh, and everybody goes, woo! Glory, glory. Right? I write it, and everybody's like, when that happens, you have to recognize, or you have to make the decision, is what they're saying true? Michelle, is what they're saying true? Because the moment you begin to believe what they say is the moment you allow discouragement to come in. And the end of discouragement is you quit and you're miserable. And the Lord doesn't want you to quit. The whole idea of the Christian walk is just enduring to the end. Right? Those who endure to the end will be saved. So what is the enemy trying to do? He's not trying to kill you. He's trying to get you to quit. If he kills you, then you're done. But if you quit, it's perpetuated. If I was to quit tomorrow, what would it do to you? If I was to say, forget about all this, I'm discouraged and I'm done. So we have to understand when those things happen, it's an attempt to get us to be discouraged, and we have to decide whether or not we believe what they're saying or we believe what God said about us. That's a struggle for even me. And I know it's a struggle for you. There's times I look in the mirror and say, I am not qualified, I'm inadequate, I don't know what I'm doing, I have no idea how to help these people. And most of the time, how it affects you is a direct testimony of your own walk. If someone misidentifies you and you quit Jesus, how close were you even walking to begin with? Who am I talking to? If someone I use that word very gently, misidentifies you, and you quit, how close were you to begin with? Maybe you were just looking for a reason to quit. And if that's the case, I'll give you some. I got a whole book on reasons to quit. The enemy starts to whisper in my ear. He's like, you're really inconsistent, man. You're supposed to be the guy in charge. You're really inconsistent. You're really, you still got some issues going on. some of those spiritual issues. We can hide the physical ones, but we can't hide the spiritual ones. He's whispering in my ear, and he's like, you know what? You're really not doing that good a job. It's the same thing Jesus dealt with in the wilderness when the enemy comes to him and he says, you know, I don't really know if you are the Son of God, but if you are, turn these stones to bread. If you really are who you think you are, if you really are what God says you are, if you really are that, Chance, if you really are a man of God, if you really are, you're going to have to prove it to me. Because all I see is inconsistency in your life. So I need you to do something to prove it. And in that moment, you have this weight of discouragement that hits you, and you're like, well, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not. You have to know who you are, or you will forever live in discouragement. So who are you? Who are you, Dustin? No, that's not a rhetorical question. That's okay, man of God. It's good. Because knowing who you are gives you permission to walk that out. Who are you, Preston? Sounds familiar. How do you fight discouragement? You have to know who you are. Recognize what's going on. It's an attack of the identity. How do you fight it? You recognize it. He's going to attack your identity. Look at what happens next. The enemy magnifies your assignment and makes it seem impossible. Samantha Crane, what has God called and put inside of you to do? No, just think about it for a second. It's not real. It's magic. So, what has God called you to do? The first thing the enemy is going to do is he's going to attack your identity and tell you you're not good enough. And then the second thing he's going to do is say it's too big anyway. That's the city is too much. I moved here thinking I'm going to save the city, and now the enemy's saying, okay, you're not good enough and it's too big anyway. Quit trying. Right? Isn't that the way it works? Isn't that what happens? Look at what he said in verse 2. Do they think they can build this wall in a single day by offering a few sacrifices? Do they actually think they can make something of stone from a rubbish heap and charred ones at that? Tobiah the Ammonite, who was standing beside him, remarked, that stone wall would collapse if even a fox walked on top of it. Once you feel that you're insufficient, you begin to believe that what God said you can do is impossible. If I'm not good enough, then there's no way it can be done. Philippians 4:13, I can do how many things? Some things. This is how faith is built. This is how faith is built. It is taking the step out and trusting that what God said, even in my insufficiencies, He's going to do through me. Jared Kerr, even in your mess ups, He's still going to do it through you. Yes, the task is big. The task has always been big. If it wasn't big, it would have already been done. But what has He called you to do that the enemy is and you're sitting here years later still in the same place because you haven't grown up, because you've allowed discouragement to cause you to quit. Think about that. After He magnifies the assignment, then He speaks words to devalue it, to allow you to justify walking away. So what does the enemy do here? He says, you're not good enough. It's too big, and then he calls it a rubbish pile. Pay attention to the words, because what he's trying to do is he's trying to get you to agree with him that the value is not what it used to be. Because if I can devalue your calling, it's easier for you to walk away from it. If I can take away the importance of what's inside of you to do, and by belittling it or saying it's not that big of a deal, then it's easier for you to turn around then and walk away from that thing. And you don't feel as bad doing it. Right? Right, Preston? That's right. Thank you, sir. It's good. They see walls to a city. They see the vision. They see the dream. We're going to rebuild what God has for us. And the enemy says it's a bunch of rubbish. It's a waste of time. Why you keep fighting for that marriage? It's a waste of time. Why you keep pouring yourself out for those people? It's a waste of time. Why you keep doing all this? It's a waste of time. They're rubbish. And when you begin to accept that, then you begin to make excuses and you begin to justify why it's okay to walk away from it. Amen. Look at verse 4 and 5. I prayed, hear us, O God, for we are being mocked. May their scoffing fall back on their own heads. That's a good prayer. I'm going to start praying that. I'm going to make me a prayer card and put that on my wall. We're being mocked, and I pray their mocking fall right back on their own heads, and may they themselves become captives in a foreign land. Don't ignore their guilt. That's pretty awesome. You know what he's saying? He's saying, go ahead and be God for them too. Just be God for them too. Don't ignore their guilt, he says. Don't blot out their sins, for they have provoked you to anger. It's amazing to me that the last thing that we want to do when we're discouraged is the first thing we should do, and that's pray. Oh, that's hurts. The last thing, Jennifer, that you want to do is the first thing you should do, and that's pray. Right? The first thing we should do is the last thing we want to do. I don't want to pray. I want to quit. When you do this, you clear your mind of the devil's attempts to stop you, and you actually see the assignment again. Okay, so let's look at this. How to fight discouragement and continue to do this. Look at what they did. After they recognize all that, they choose to work with enthusiasm. Do you know that enthusiasm is a choice? Enthusiasm is a choice. Right, Sherry? I'm happy. So happy. They choose to work with enthusiasm. Watch it. Look at what it says in verse 6. At last the wall was completed to half its height around the city. Why? Because the people worked with enthusiasm. The King James there, the actual translation in the King James says, they had a mind to work. And that Hebrew word there for mind means heart, will, and intellect. They set it in themselves to do this. They began to work with enthusiasm, and they actually constructed half the wall around the entire city of Jerusalem. The whole time the enemy was whispering to them, you can't do this. You're not good enough. You can't do this. Stop. You can't do this. This is a waste of time. Why do you keep investing in this? Why are you wasting your time? Why are you doing this? And the whole time they are ignoring the discouragement of the enemy, and they're continuing to build something that they saw in a heap of rubble. It's a heap of rubble. No, we're going to keep building it. We're going to keep building it. Discouragement set in. They countered it with prayer, and then they looked at their assignment and put their heart, their will, and their mind into that assignment. This is how things that are frustrating to other people become easy to you. Children's ministry. If you don't have enthusiasm in children's ministry, you are not going to make it. They will eat you alive. We won't find your body. You have to work with enthusiasm. Now, that doesn't take away from the hardness of the job at hand. Was their job hard? When I first got out of high school, I got a job for a week working at a construction company, building a motel, and my job was the grunt guy that carried all the blocks to the block layers and carried the wheelbarrow full of mortar, thank you, to those guys. By the way, the wheelbarrow had a flat tire. Always has a flat tire. And I couldn't keep up fast enough. They're always, more mortar, come on, more blocks. And here I am, 18, 19 years old, and I worked 5 days. I got my check for like $34, and I quit. Building a wall is not an easy thing. But it didn't. They still chose to do the hard thing with enthusiasm. And it made the work go by faster. Number 2, look what they did. They guarded the promise. Verse 9, but we prayed to our We prayed to our God, and we guarded the city day and night to protect ourselves. The King James says they actually set themselves a watch. They put a watchman on the wall. They put someone there to stay alert. We guarded the promise of God. How many times does God say something over you and then you just kind of sit back and wait on it to happen and then realize after years that it's not going to happen on its own? The Bible teaches us that while men sleep, the enemy comes in and plants weeds among the wheat. We have to be cautious of the fact that if God said for us to do it, we're not just waiting on Him. We have to guard what He says. That means, what does that mean? That means you can't tell everybody about what God's got for you to do. Because some people aren't your best friend and don't have your best interest in mind. Some people are actually wanting to destroy you because they're jealous. So there's a guarding that has to take place. What He's put inside of our hearts to do, we guard it. We have to see the value there. Number 3, look at this very quickly. I'm hurrying. Refuse to listen to any voice that speaks compromise. The people began to complain. They got discouraged. Look at verse 10. And they said, the workers are getting tired and there's so much rubble to be moved. We'll never be able to build the wall by ourselves. Meanwhile, our enemies were saying, before they know what's happened, we're going to swoop down on them and kill them and end their work. Notice that they respond to what the enemy says by the threats, by saying, now watch, before they built half of it, it was a wall, even though it was rubbish. Now that it's halfway built, it's rubbish, not a wall. Before they build anything, they have vision and they have enthusiasm. The enemy keeps getting in and distracting them and discouraging them. And now the wall that they've built looks like rubble to them. They've changed their mind about what they were doing. They've changed their perspective, and they began to listen to the voice of compromise. And when they did, they began to see what they were assigned to do as not important anymore. It's not important anymore. If you had the time to complain about the way things are going, you've probably got one foot out the door anyway. Come on. The best thing you can do when the enemy begins to speak compromise in your life is combat it with the truth of the word. We did this Friday night at Never Broken. Think of a word or two that describe what you are right now. Good or bad. Just think of any word. Just give me a word that describes where you're at. Chance. Don't be all religious on me. Tell the truth. Defeated. Give me a word. Fat. Ali Finn, give me a word. Tired. Give me a word. Dustin, give me a word. Happy. That's good. Jenna, give me a word. Content. Okay, that's good. Samantha, give me a word. Be honest. What do you think about yourself right now? Humble? Good. Jerry Clark, what you got? Handiwork? Very good. Michelle. Moving forward. Very good. Michelle. She said no. The reality is, whether good or bad, Rebecca, give me a word. Y'all a bunch of third cousins of Jesus. Give me a word. Strong. Good. Katie Joe, give me a word. Tripped up. Okay. Hannah Clark, give me a word. Hannah, stop crying. Busy. Now, I want you to see this. Just because that's the reality of your life doesn't mean it's true. Jesus says, I'm the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If Jesus is true, then whatever you're feeling must filter through his character to be true for you. Now, what was the word you said? Defeated. Is Jesus defeated? Then you being defeated cannot be true. Regardless of how defeated you feel in the moment. Now, I don't know theologically what fat has to do with it. But what'd you say? What was it when you said tripped up? Was Jesus tripped up? So as bad as you feel about tripped up, it's not true. Because Jesus does not see us in the middle of our issue. He sees us based on our potential. He doesn't filter how he sees us through what we are dealing with. He filters through the covenant. He sees us in our potential. And when, come on, amen. And when we, oh wow, Siri's talking to me. And when we begin to look at what is wrong instead of focusing what we're called to do, we will begin to make excuses and we will begin to belittle what God's called us to do. Think about that. Verse 4, number 4, they encouraged each other. How do you fight discouragement? You encourage each other. Verse 14, I looked over the situation. I called together the leaders, the nobles, the rest of the people, and said to them, don't be afraid of the enemy. Remember the Lord who is great and glorious, and fight for your brothers. Fight for your sons. Fight for your daughters. Fight for your wives. Fight for your homes. When our enemies heard that we knew of their plans and that God had frustrated them, we all returned to our work on the wall. But from then on, only half of my men worked, while the other half stood guard with spears, shields, bows, and coats of mail. The leaders stationed themselves behind the people of Judah. Verse 16 in the King James says, the other half held a spear. That word held in the Hebrew is encouraged. But because the translators couldn't make sense of that in vernacular, they put the word held. One half of them encouraged the spears. The word spear there is actually weapon or branch. That's why they had trouble translating it. That's why Jesus said in John 15, I'm the vine, you are the branches. Say, I'm a branch. So what he was saying then is, with the same effort that we put into the rebuilding, we put the same amount of effort into encouraging the branches. We are defending ourselves on one side and we're working on the other. We're continuing to do the vision, but at the same time we're doing it, we're not losing sight that in the work of the vision, my brother needs to be encouraged. In the process of doing this, it's my job to make sure that as we're all doing what we're supposed to do, that you don't get discouraged. It's my job. That's heavy weight for me. And guess what? It's your job to make sure I don't get discouraged. That's a heavy weight for you. But in the building of what God's put inside of you to do, it is our job to look at the person next to you and remind them what God said, remind them what he said about them, remind them who they are, remind them that they can do it, and put courage back into them. That's how we fight discouragement, by having brothers and sisters in our life that is willing to look at us and say, keep fighting the fight, get your mind right, quit pouting, and let's do this. So good. Defend each other. We're family. Hold a spear. Think about that. Be willing to fight over discouragement. When you cut covenant with us, it's freaky. Right? I'm not trying to embarrass you, but some of y'all understand that when you said yes to us, it meant we were coming to your house all the time. We were messing with you. We were having to go to doctor's appointments with you. We're getting in your business, right? And if you get discouraged, guess what we're going to do? We're going to come over your house. We're going to bring some food. We're going to beat on your door till you open it. And we're going to tell you to stop it. You're a branch, Jesus said. And that same word for branch in the Hebrew is also weapon. You're a weapon. In other words, the only way that the enemy is going to stop what we're doing together is if he takes away my weapon. And you're my weapon. If he takes away my encouragement. If he takes you away from me and me away from you. Think about what we could be doing if we all were fighting against discouragement. Number 5, very quickly. I'm almost done. Hang in there. They never fought alone. Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 19. I explained to the nobles and said, the work is spread out and we're widely separated along the wall. When you hear the blast of the trumpet, rush to wherever it sounds and God will fight for us. What's the first thing you do when you feel discouraged? Separate. First thing you do as soon as you feel discouraged is you isolate yourself. What does Nehemiah say? As soon as the attack comes, come together. And don't miss this, because he says this. As soon as you come together, that's when God fights for us. When you come together is when the Lord begins to, look at what he said. When you hear the sound, come to wherever it is. And when we come together, the Lord will fight for us. Could it be that you're fighting against something that you shouldn't be fighting against? That the Lord could handle like that if you would just step out of discouragement and isolation and begin to commit to being planted in the ground around other trees? That's good preaching right there. I want to encourage you to awaken the things God has put inside of you. Come on, just lift your hands and bow your heads. Close your eyes. I just break off discouragement in the room. And I encourage you to fight the fight that's in front of you by knowing who you are in the room. If you're facing discouragement in the room and you're ready to quit, just stand to your feet with both hands lifted. If you're fighting discouragement, just stand to your feet. Both hands lifted. Both hands lifted. Come on, don't lie. Come on, be honest if you're fighting discouragement. Now look, there's a bunch of spears around the room standing up that feel like they're about to fall. If you love Jesus in this room, if you're a part of this house, I want you to look around, and if there's someone standing that's a brother or sister to you. Men, if you see another man in the room, I want you to go to them right now that's standing. And I want you to encourage them. Don't get all super spiritual and religious on me. I want you to encourage them with your words. Ladies, if there's a lady standing around you, I want you to go encourage them. We release encouragement. Why? Because if we lose you, we lose an important part of what we're building. So we release encouragement in the room. Come on. We release encouragement. I encourage my brothers. I encourage my sisters. Come on, I just encourage them now. Hallelujah. Come on, speak life over them. Come on, speak encouragement over them.